Welcome to the Morning Energy Show, where we explore the tools, people, and mindsets shaping the future of solar. Today's guest is Luke Miseyko, a powerhouse recruiter, consultant, and head of sales for NurtureMe, a tech-forward company helping organizations scale through organic recruiting systems. From building national strategies at Cutco and helping over 100 companies in solar, roofing, and pest control double their teams through culture-driven recruiting, Luke's mission is clear: transform lives through leadership and personal growth. We dig into how the best teams scale, the rise of AI in recruiting, and why your company culture might be your biggest recruiting tool. And now, your host of the Morning Energy Show, Jay Kess.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Morning Energy Show. I'm very excited for our guest this week because I've spent a lot of time with him in some exotic places. The man is extremely fun, and I love to communicate with him because he is phenomenal at touching your soul and getting down to the deep root of all of the things that you love in life. Luke, I'm happy to have you on here. Thank you.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you, man.
So I have some questions for you. Can we dive into them?
Let's do it.
Can you share the story with NurtureMe? What is it, and what is the mission behind it?
Absolutely. So NurtureMe is a software product that we've or really a suite of products that we've come up with to help generate, track, and manage recruiting leads, essentially. And so NurtureMe itself is an applicant tracking system that's built on its own LLM, where you're essentially training a recruiting agent or like an AI agent to help with a lot of the outreach, a lot of the workflows, a lot of the confirmations in the process, just making your recruiting overall much more efficient. We built some other tools in there. An LLM, large language model. Yeah, I'm not a huge tech guy either, but I've been trained by my CTO, who I'm sure we'll dive into to talk about her a bit on how to talk about that and exactly what it is. What I really know is that it's training AI in the background to handle a lot of those tasks that are pretty time consuming within recruiting. And so on top of that, we've built an app called NurtureMe, which is a tool to drive personal recruiting in the organization and really gamify personal recruiting. And that's, I'm sure we'll get into that, but that is where we found over the past few years to be, where most high quality reps are coming from. And so how we got here, I never expected to be running a software company by any means. I started off back in the day selling Cutco knives. I feel like most people in the industry usually come from the Cutco vein or the Vivint vein. Right?
It is. It's Vivint or Cutco. I call it Vivint. I'm Vivint born.
Yeah. I'm Cutco born. So I was from an early age got into their recruiting task force, which gave me this. My job was to essentially implement new strategies in batches of 15 to 20 offices and track the results.
I like that task force.
Yeah, it gave me this muscle for finding new strategies and implementing it in multiple organizations, even ones that were not my own. Right. And so in doing that, I had a lot of fun doing that because my life was changed through sales and I loved being able to extend that impact to other people. That's, essentially how I view recruiting. And so I leveraged that experience to go into private equity, which growing up, I always thought was my dream job. Turns out was not. I did well with it.
You did jump into private equity?
Oh yeah. I'd been there. I did that for a little over a year.
Did you dip the toe and hop out, or?
It was more than dip the toe. I was in it. And we were at a small firm where I had a decent amount of responsibility and, raising a few $1 million for late stage private equity investments, but it was coming from this world of sales and training and leadership. I had such a sense of fulfillment with all of that, which felt like it just got stripped away when I went into private equity. I was helping rich guys get their next private jet, which is cool. I could see myself being there, but I wasn't the one picking the companies we were investing in. Right. And so I wasn't super passionate about those companies necessarily, which is where a lot of the fulfillment in that industry can come from. And so that's when my partner, Andrew, he's my best friend, been my best friend for decades now. And he sat me down and he was like, dude, I can tell you're not happy. I was like, oh,
he saw that, huh?
Yeah, he saw that. And he was like, hey, let's go run this thing together. And so, we started doing some recruiting consulting stuff. And in that, 4-year gap where we were doing recruiting and leadership development consulting, there were just some tools that we saw were missing. That we were like, hey, it'd be a lot easier and we'd have a much bigger impact if we had this, and this. And so
instead, that 4-year gap, are you referring to AlwaysBeRecruiting?
Yes. Yep. Okay. AlwaysBeRecruiting in that time span where we're primarily doing consulting. And we're just missing some tools. We're like, all right, we ran into Anna and we said, okay, let's build these things, and spent the last year building those, and now are kind of transitioning from more of a consulting based company to a software company. So
I'm going to dive in and ask the question what those tools are in a little bit. And it's funny you bring up Anna, because one of the questions I have listed here is about Anna. And I think I know you guys are super proud of her, and I met her. She's extremely knowledgeable and kind. So I'm excited for everyone to kind of get to see who or hear who she is through your words. Before I get there, though, of all the careers you could have pursued, what drew you to recruiting? What fuels your passion for it?
Yeah, as you mentioned right at the top, I'm someone that's always looking for depth, right? And always looking for depth and meaning and growth. And what really started that journey was just getting into sales, right? Like, sales starts you on this journey of looking inward and growing personally in a way that, I was very similar to most guys growing up, right? Like, in college, I was in a fraternity and kind of just doing my thing. I studied finance because it felt cool at the time. But then after getting into sales, it was this whole new world of like, oh, whoa, this, whole personal growth journey that kicks off when you get into sales, right? And
Well, you did mention earlier that it changed your life.
Yeah.
Can you expand on that a little bit, since we're at this stage that you're talking about it?
Yeah, I mean, I would say when it comes to changing your life, like, everybody that gets into sales, I think, probably has a similar story, but it just like opened my mind up to, thinking for myself is kind of the best way to put it. Not being in the typical 9-to-5 box, right? Not being in the, not thinking with the grain of society, right? It automatically forces you to go against the grain and think for yourself. And that has, it kind of starts in sales and then moves out to all these different areas of life that, I now challenge things. I now want to grow for who I am and look inwards for my growth rather than outwards. I would say that's one thing that, in sales, I was very much looking outwards for growth and all these different mentors and all these different strategies and things you can learn to get better. And then the older I get and the more that I grow, the more I look inwards for that same thing. Right.
Well put.
So grateful for that journey. And I just look back, I'm like, what was the initial spark for that? And that was just getting into an organization that had a culture of personal growth. And so really what fuels my passion is that, I now can work with companies to help facilitate that growth and do that for thousands of people, if not millions of people.
You like working with companies? That's a passion of yours to do this?
Absolutely. Yeah. I find the ripple effects are so much bigger, and the ripple effects you can have. And I specifically love working in tandem with recruiting, but also how to create that culture of growth to make sure people are feeling that impact when they do come into an organization. Right.
Oh, you actually help people with the culture as well. Because that is, it's a big retention tool. You can recruit people. I mean, you're the expert here. This is more of a question. You can recruit people and then you bring them into the business. And if the culture isn't there, you lose them pretty quickly.
Yeah. And I've seen it work without the culture. I think that's not a popular answer necessarily. I've seen a lot of boring business be able to retain people, at least initially. Right.
Okay.
But long-term retention, and this kind of goes back into what fuels it, is ultimately, like, most people in this industry, some are, but most people are not like that fired up about clean energy. It's not like they're waking up in the morning and they're like, all right, like, let's go save the environment. Like, that's usually not what's, and for some people it is, and I love that. But for most people, what they are really excited about is how this opportunity has changed their lives and how it can be a vehicle to help change others. Right.
Yeah.
And so the way I view recruiting and retention and that growth oriented culture is ultimately what this is this is a vehicle that can help people get from where they are to where they want to go. And ultimately, that's what you're doing with recruiting, right? Is like, hey, this is an opportunity. That in between, right, of how to get people from where they are to where they want to go usually involves something like sell more, make more money, advance with the company, gain some valuable experience, learn along the way, like all these different lessons that can come within that gap. But ultimately, what everyone is trying to do is just bridge that gap and weave an incredible vehicle to be able to do that the traditional 9-to-5 often does not. Right. And that's really what fuels the passion around recruiting, is can help spark that journey for other people, just like it did mine. And I was blessed with a very great mentor that taught me to manage people in that way right from the start. And that's, what I try to infuse into every organization that we work with.
Oh my gosh, I love that answer. And you hit the nail right on the head with the hammer. It was beautiful because you're right. Nobody works a 9 to 5 and says, you know what? I love this job. I love this company. I'm going to go build my own company anyway. They don't do that.
Yeah.
They want to build their own company because they believe that they can do it better than any of the experience that they've had previous. And your passion is helping people achieve that goal and creating that culture, bringing the people in and generating that revenue because you can't run a business without it, right? And
Mhm.
salespeople are the ones that go out and snag that business and the revenue. I love that you said that you like that ripple effect and that you're passionate about helping these business owners reach their goals and potential. That's pretty cool. Do you have any testimonials or any big stories you've worked on that you were just like, wow, I helped that company big time? Like, what's your biggest success story with that?
That's a great question. It's a great question. What's fun? I've got plenty of examples that are very driven by numbers. I mean, there's one team at Legacy that we took from 92 to over 200 reps. There was another one that we helped them hire 72 personal recruits. So the highest, they were purely using Indeed, getting Indeed quality reps, and then switched to more of organic recruiting model. Went from 15 to 72 reps that were all personal recruits and higher quality than I've ever seen. But what I really love is when people come to our events or when they hear me speak. I have people all the time that will come to me a year later and it's like, hey, this little thing that you said helped spark this journey for me, helped me, think of this thing this different way. And it's really those little examples that I when I'm speaking or when I'm coaching them or whatever it might be, I'm not thinking that that's necessarily the one sentence that's going to be the difference, but it's so different for everyone. Those are the things I really, really love to see. And a lot of times I find that in my work, part of the impact I'm having is the ripple effects you can have through recruiting and helping grow these organizations, but it's also just being the light for other people that can help shine upon something they never saw before. Right. Those little daily interactions, whether that be on a Zoom call or at an event or from a stage or whatever it is just that little thing that can help reframe someone for something or see something in themselves that they never saw before. I think that's really what I believe one of my gifts is that is just trying to be the light for other people. And that's what I focus on. And there's been times in my career where that has dimmed and that light has dimmed. I haven't focused on that as much and the results tend to follow. Right. And that's any time that there's been like this cyclical down period has been when there hasn't been a focus on gratitude and being the light for other people. And when I do that, I find that a lot of the technical things follow, and that's what I really love. And I'm so grateful that is a gift of mine because I look back and I'm like, some people are gifted to be numbers people. Like one of the things I've learned is just my greatest gift is to just be myself, and that's really where those beautiful stories come from is when you are so authentically you.
Oh, that is powerful. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
It's the little things. If I could tell you that one sentence, no, that one little sentence. All right. So switching gears a little bit, you recently rebranded. We just talked about it. Always Be Recruiting. What inspired the change and what impact has it had?
Yeah, we're really changing from a consulting company to a software company, right? And what I think is really unique. I mean, one of the greatest advantages we had when we initially got into the industry was that we were outsiders. We weren't thinking of problems the same exact way that the rest of the industry was. We weren't thinking of recruiting the same way that the rest of the industry was. And we took this experience from both Cutco, private equity, and helping build some other sales organizations that we brought into the solar world and applied some of those strategies and saw some success with that. Well, now we're kind of doing the same thing within software where it's like most traditional software companies build that specific marketing funnel to do X, Y, Z, right? Where we're not really coming into this as a software company. We're coming into this as a company that has done consulting and has built community and then building a software to serve that community, right? And it's almost that order of operations. There's so many software companies that are trying to build community, whereas we're really a community company that's offering that community software. Right?
All right. I can get behind that.
That's what I'm really excited about. And ultimately the reason for the rebrand is because we do want to be a software company. transparently, I will say that is something that lights me up. I'm really excited for learning a completely new process.
Why the shift there? Why all of a sudden software, not like traditional consulting or brick and mortar traveling? Like, why software?
Yeah, with consulting, I found there's a number of ways you can do it. One of the bottlenecks is me, right? I have taken on other people to kind of train them as consultants, but there was always this different level of like, all right, like, there's only so much you can coach someone, and when a lot of mine is coming from a decade plus of experience around it, right? And so part of it was the growth capacity. But I will say that the biggest thing is when we built this software, it was specifically out of a need of the customers of the people I was consulting for. I was stepped back and thought, what are the things that would make this a lot easier, that could help these companies grow so much faster? We looked out in the market and it wasn't necessarily there. A lot of applicant tracking systems were very clunky. They're not geared towards direct sales. And we thought like, hey, what if we just built it? And once we started asking that question, it was all, we really got into a zone of doing market research with our clients and being able to, we had this beautiful customer base of about 100 companies that we can then go ask, what are the true needs of the market? What do we need to build for them? What are the things that is going to make the user experience more friendly? And that was, really a unique position for us to be able to build something like this. And so, ultimately it is just the change from more consulting to software, which we're really, really excited about.
Yeah, you want a larger impact. If it's your passion and you were limited with the amount of time and people you could affect, I could imagine wanting larger impact.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So everyone is looking for quality reps that work hard. Where can we find them?
Yeah, this is, one of the questions I get most often is people are like, where do I find reps that just, they want to do it right off the rip and they're motivated reps, right?
Is it weird that they ask you that question knowing that your whole business is to get them recruits and they come and ask you for free advice? Is that weird?
This is usually if I'm on a podcast or on stage or something like that, and they are kind of leaning on the expertise, right? And I will say, it's funny that most people in the industry, they default to something like Indeed or ZipRecruiter or even Instagram ads or Facebook ads and things like that. And fundamentally, one thing I've found is that if someone is responding to an ad, whether that be on a job board or Instagram or whatever it is, about a job, 90% of the time they're in one of two situations. They're either not very good at their current job and looking for a new one, or they're struggling to find a job and applying for a bunch of them. Either way, either one of those, it's usually not the highest quality candidate, right? And so ideally, I want to find the guy that is maybe, I talked to someone the other day that found a guy that was selling furniture. He's making $60K a year selling furniture. And the guy's a killer sales guy. He's been learning how to sell by selling furniture and pumping him into a seller organization to see what he can accomplish. Like, that is the kind of guy I want. But he's not on Indeed. He's not responding to ads because he feels like he's all right. It's a college kid that's never made $60K before. Right. So he's happy and not necessarily looking, but someone had to go headhunt him and find him in order to get him into the right organization. Right. And so I find personal referrals by far are where most quality reps come from, right? Those are the ones that do have a proclivity to work hard. Those are the ones that do have a common connection with someone on the team. So they're more willing to face some adversity and actually work through it and stick around than someone that is just applying for 10 different jobs, because if they see adversity in one job, they're all right, I'll just go to one of those other ones I interviewed.
So it's not necessarily just recycling all the same people that are currently in the industry. You pluck one person from one company and then they refer everyone else in the industry. You're actually going out and finding new raw talent.
Green recruits. I'm a big fan of green recruit, and green just means new recruits that haven't been exposed to the industry before, that you can train the way that you want to. And my little red flag goes up anytime someone only recruits from within the industry. I understand there are some companies that have an incredible opportunity where that might be the case, and it might make sense for teams to come there. But most of the time, if someone is established in the industry and they're jumping around, they're usually probably just going to jump around the next time another opportunity comes to that. If there's another financial opportunity that outweighs this one, which there always will be someone trying to outpace you, trying to recruit your people. And the most loyal people are the ones that are green recruits that came up, trained them how you want them. You gave them a long-term vision of how they can advance within the organization, and you're able to get them from where they are to where they want to go, which is what recruiting is at its core. Right. And so Big fan of finding green recruits through personal referrals that I found to be by far, the most successful. We actually, when I mentioned doing a case study with our clients, we found that 80% of all sales reps that stuck around a year or longer were actually personal referrals.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, and so only 20% came from ads and things like that. But when we looked at how much energy was being spent on recruiting, typically it's over 50% of the energy is going towards Indeed ads and managing any sort of Instagram ads or whatever it is where people are coming to them.
And is that the market research that you did where you said, hey, this is where the hole is?
Yep, okay. Absolutely. We have an advisor with Salesforce as well who, Salesforce did another study. I can actually pull up what the exact numbers are. I believe they got, so they got 2 million applications last year for people to work at Salesforce. And of those, 1.85 million of them were non-referral applications, right? So 1.85 million out of the 2 million were non-referral applications. From that batch of 1.85 million, they hired 5,000 people. With referrals, they got
200,000.
Yeah, say it again.
And it came from the other 200,000 that were not from the referral-based ones?
The 5,000 hires from non-referral came from 1.85 million applications. There were 150,000 referral applications where they hired the same 5,000 applications. So it took, over 10 times as many referrals or non-referral candidates to hire those same 5,000 people, right? And so we started noticing that this was really the case, not just in this, little corner of the sales industry that we were a part of. We started to see all these different case studies of different companies and all these different industries. And ultimately, the world is craving community, right? And when you think of where people find jobs nowadays, a lot of times it comes through referrals. It comes through word of mouth, even outside of sales, right? And I think that as we move into this age of AI and technological advancements and people being more on their phones, like people crave that sense of community so much, where we have this hyper connectivity, but also people are not super connected at the same time. And any way that we can be pushing, the concept of community forwards is something that I'm willing to pour a lot of energy into, right? And that's where we're seeing success in the job market as well. Is, I was joking with someone the other day. It's like, I've never had to make a resume. Why? Because every job I've ever had and every company I've ever started and worked with has been through a connection, right? And I think that's the way that a lot of people will be operating in the future. Is a lot of that does come from just connections and utilizing networks and hiring in that way.
That's awesome. I don't have a resume myself, and
right.
I mean that's fair, because like I don't want a job that's going to hire me based on a resume, right? They're looking at my previous credentials. Like, let's see what I'm capable of, right? Mm-hmm. Give me a shot. Many claim to be great at recruiting, but have let people down. What sets your services apart, and why should businesses trust you?
Absolutely. I mean, one thing is, just track record of, what we do expands far beyond just recruiting. Like we talked about, like I want to work on retention and culture and how we can really get a lot of those things going and really have that support this whole ecosystem of changing lives with your organization. That's really what we're all about. What I'd say is also just take a look at the tools we've built. Like, there's people often ask, like, what is our competition? And it's very unlike anything that's been built and that I've seen before. And so I wouldn't say there are many alternatives to getting something very similar. You could always just recruit through Indeed, but if you want to grow through referrals, if you want to grow the organization, introduce AI into the recruiting process, I just haven't seen a lot out there around that.
What does the AI do in the recruiting process? Like, what is it? Is it the one that talks to the people? Like, hey, you should come to check out this company?
Yeah, there's a few different components. One of them is an AI caller to schedule interviews. So, if you're generating a lot of referrals within the organization, one of the big bottlenecks that I saw was getting managers or recruiters to actually reach out to all these people, because a lot of times they were sitting on thousands of leads that they could call and set for interviews. So a few ways you can do that is there's AI callers, which I used to not be about that. I used to hear the AI callers be like, that's never going to be what a human can be. And, there's always the joke of like, hey, if you're in sales, it's the one job AI can't take. And I'm starting to hear these AI callers and I'm like, I don't know, dude. Like, you're getting pretty good. And so that's one thing that we are working on. Another is just, it can read conversations that you've had through the system with reps that are successful. So you can link it with sales data to see like who are my most successful reps that have gone through, been in an interview, showed for the interview, showed the training, got onboarded, etc. And it'll start to recognize like, hey, here's what's actually working, and then encourage you to do those things.
Of those people.
Yep. So it'll start by giving you smart suggestions by saying, hey, we believe you should say this. And once it has enough data, it can just take over for you and say, hey, we'll just handle these conversations. And so
wow, that's really cool.
Yeah. And then another is it'll help recognize bottlenecks in the recruiting process. I think a lot of times people just aren't tracking a lot of their data. So that's step one, just getting them to track stuff and seeing like what is actually our show percentage to interviews. What is our show percentage? Not just, in total, if I have 10 people set for an interview, how many are showing up? But if 3 of them are like 5-star recruits or the top people we want, what percentage of those are showing up? And same thing with interviews and training. And if you have a multi-step interview process, like there's a lot that you can track in the system, and it's a lot that can easily be overlooked. And so what this system will do is it'll help recognize like, hey, your reach rate for Indeed, applicants specifically is low. And here's 3 different things you can do to do XYZ. Right.
Oh, cool. Making it more efficient.
It can almost operate as like a consultant, right? Of recognizing bottlenecks within your process and help you save money, help you, make smarter financial decisions around recruiting as well.
So we're going to get into some of the secret sauce that Luke has for us on recruiting and what this app is capable of doing. But Luke, I have another hard question for you.
Let's do it.
So recruiting is arguably one of the most profitable and less time-consuming positions in this industry. If it's so lucrative, why not place people yourselves in these organizations and take an override off of them?
Yeah, I get this question all the time. And there's a few different ways I could answer it. And one of the things I will say is I have seen one thing that really contributes to success with recruiting is congruency within the entire process. So when there is like a handoff from maybe one company to another, or there is any sort of like switch over of like, cool, you're working with this person, now you're working with this person early on in a rep's career, it really tanks that efficiency, right? And so that's one thing is it is just significantly less efficient when you do it that way. Number 2 is, a lot of the basis of why we built this and why it works at such a high level is that value of personal referrals in the recruiting process. Driving personal referrals within the recruiting process typically takes a relationship with that rep or a relationship with that person within the organization, right? And so if I were to go and just run the training and develop a relationship with all these people as they're being onboarded and as they're starting to sell, and I was doing their sales coaching, and then I was using that to generate referrals, then yes, it could make sense, but that kind of pigeonholes me into working with one company with how time consuming that might be, right? And so that's another is the relationship with the rep is really what can drive a lot of that. And then, another thing I found, and this is something that I believe I heard it from Sam Taggart back in the day, where he's like, Sam? It's not always the best soldiers that make the best generals. It's not always the best, the best coaches in the NBA weren't always the best players. And as I stepped into consulting, I'll be transparent. I had a lot of imposter syndrome of like, who am I to be a consultant, right? And I even didn't like consultants coming. It's like, who does this guy think he is? And then all of a sudden I found out I'm one of them. I'm like, oh no. And I found it's a very different skill set to get things implemented within an organization and through leaders versus being the frontline soldier, right? I'm a big Miami Heat fan, and Eric Spoelstra is not the best basketball player by any means, but he is the best coach in the NBA. You might have opinions on that, but but
coaches in the NBA.
Yeah. But I find that muscle is very different, right? And so now, we have been doing that consulting component, and I found that I really enjoyed doing that and working with business owners versus working with entry-level sales reps. And getting things implemented through organizations because of the level of impact it can have.
Okay, so we've been talking a lot about like maybe the theory of this app or the software that you have that could actually help people. But let's get down to the nitty gritty of it. Like, what is actually in this thing? So here's my next question to you. If a listener decided to onboard with you today, what would they have access to? And in what order would you recommend that they utilize each of these features?
Absolutely. We actually do offer a free trial for 30 days. So if you are interested in doing this, we'll make sure we include the link below to do that. And here's typically the journey of what this looks like is we have a unique combination of tech as well as that consulting support, right? Instead of being a consulting company, we have now just used that as essentially a free resource for our clients to get these things built out because we have all these different resources around it. And so I first thing I look at is what does their recruiting process look like? How have they been finding people? Is it very Indeed or ad driven versus do they have a pretty strong organic recruiting program already in place, right? And the first thing I would look at is how do we implement organic recruiting into the mix to help them get higher quality people? And so when doing that, the first thing I take a look at is their incentive program. How are they incentivizing recruiting? How are
And
they?
do you help with that? Do you help consult with that?
Absolutely. Yeah. That's,
Okay,
one of
cool.
the first things we'll do is, help them iron that out if they don't already have one, or help them just refine it a little bit. Find a lot of times that people are solely relying on things like overrides or cash compensation for recruiting. Number one, it might give kind of that MLM feel that people might want to avoid. And number two is that when they do that, a sales rep's job is to sell. And so when they see only financial compensation, you have most of the team that thinks, I'm not going to worry about recruiting. I'm just going to sell because these guys are already making 2, 3, 4 grand for a sale. Why would they go bust their butt for $500 for a recruit?
Well, I mean,
So
another thing I can, I guess, think of if I was an owner is like the cost of an incentive program. If they don't have one, then do they have to increase their price point to the sales reps or for the homeowners?
Well, usually there is no, I would say, because usually there's also a cost associated with getting Indeed recruits or placing ads
Oh,
for
that's fair.
recruits. And you have a cost per recruit on that side. When someone comes from referral, they're free. Word of mouth is the most effective form of communication and it's free. Right. And so if we can drive that somehow by putting a little bit of budget behind that on what we would typically be spending on Indeed or whatever referral source or whatever recruiting source they have, then we'll take a careful look at the budget and say, all right, you can always have a stipulation of, hey, a rep needs to sell 3 deals in order to qualify for whatever.
Oh, okay, cool.
That way, make sure it's a smart financial decision right off the rep, right? And then I'm a big fan of like experiences. I'm a big fan of, even having some physical prize you can hand to someone in a team meeting that starts to build the culture because other reps see it. They're like, oh, whoa, I want that.
Luke, I love your experiences. I love your experiences. Is that what you're talking about? Is things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I find those are great for retention as well as having trips, having different experiences that you can run to bring reps there. And, I always think like what makes a great gift? It's something you wouldn't necessarily buy for yourself. Right. But
True.
you want it. Right? It's the same thing goes for a great incentive. Right. It's like, what is something your reps aren't necessarily getting for themselves or your people wouldn't necessarily get for themselves? So one incentive I like to put in place that I've put in place before is like a Michelin star dinner. You plus one, you get to go have the best meal of your entire life. What's that going to cost you as a manager or an owner? Like $500? Most of us are giving out thousands in overrides on top of it and spending more on something they're like, they don't even see it because it's a few $100 on every paycheck and it doesn't even make it a big difference, right? And so we'll go through and help them structure an incentive program that helps build the culture of recruiting in the organization. It gets people to want to do it because they want to do it, not just because we're asking them, right? Then we need to figure out a way of generating leads around referrals and recruiting, right? And that's one thing that a lot of times people tell, when they think of personal recruiting, they'll go tell their reps like, hey, go talk to people and bring me people when you're interested. But that doesn't really work because then they go tell you they've reached out to a bunch of people. They haven't necessarily, and you really don't have much control over that. And so what we've built is an app called Frenzy that reps can download that will automatically sync with their contacts. And as an owner or manager, you can load it up with custom questions to help drive referral generation. So it can say, who do you know that's a former athlete? If you typically work well with athletes, cool. Now you're generating leads that are athletes, right? And they'll put down a bunch of people that they know that are athletes. Same thing with who do you know that'd be a good cultural fit for the team? Who do you know that's entrepreneurial? Who do you know that's a go-getter? And you can custom load these questions to be able to generate whatever kinds of leads that you want. Right. And so now we're finding people that are much higher quality than the people that are desperate for jobs coming to you on Indeed. Right.
Yeah, that's cool because you're kind of prompting these questions for them to get their brain thinking, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so it could do a lot of that work for you instead of you having to sit there and give them thought joggers. You can build it right into the app. The app is also customizable, so you can put your own company logos and things like that on there.
Oh, you can white label it?
Yeah. So we have
Very
a white
cool.
label option where you can go on and you can really fully customize it. So, and then we need a way of scheduling those leads, right? And so that's where early on, we'll work with you. We've got plenty of scripts. Like this is kind of where that consulting experience comes into play. So we've got plenty of scripts on how you can reach out through calls, through text, whatever it might be. And in the long run, it's we start to look at how can we introduce AI into the scheduling for your people, right? And that's what we were talking about a little bit before. And so then from there, you've got this full tracking system built into NurtureMe where you can track all that data from who's being set for interviews, who's showing for interviews, from what sources are they coming from, where's my, you can plug in how much money you're spending on these incentives versus on Indeed, and it can help you start making those financial decisions and really tracking that whole process from A to Z. And as a leader, you can then see all of your different recruiters, the results they're getting, and what are their shows to interview. So it can really help you just manage that entire process. And so
one of the things that you hit, you nailed the word, gamification. With all of this tracking, and you've been talking about tracking every single time you talk about what this feature or what this software is available or capable of doing, right?
Mhm.
And with all of that tracking, you guys have created gamification on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's one of the biggest things around building a culture around recruiting. And when I talk about like building this out of a need from when we were consulting, the thing that kept making me so mad is I would hop on calls and I would be like, all right, tell me like what's going on, because we'd have these spreadsheets that we set up and people just wouldn't update their spreadsheets, right? And just getting, I know, especially in a large
Kryptonite to a sales rep,
right, is in a large organization, even sales managers, if you got to constantly remind 20 people to update something, it's just not going to happen. And so making that automatic, making that part of the process of like, hey, someone shows up for an interview, it's automatically logged in there, they go on, they mark the show, and that way it's aggregating all of that data for you, right?
that is awesome.
Yeah, that's a game changer for the recruiting process, and really just for us to be able to see what kind of impact it's having. And you asked what set us apart earlier. I think it's very clear to see the ROI, right? It's very clear when we have that data to be like, cool, here's the reps you've gotten, here's how much they've sold. Like, is that worth it? And one thing we do include in our free trial is we guarantee that you'll get a minimum of 3 reps. I almost don't like talking about it because it's much higher than that. Most of the time, depending on the size of the organization, but we want to do something that just like covers the cost, right? Make sure that no matter what, it's going to be a win. And so we even offer that like with our free trial of just like, we guarantee you'll get recruits as long as you're hopping on those initial calls that we have to set up everything. Obviously you can't just sign up and not do anything. But we actually have a recruiting jumpstart program that we help people implement this into their organizations in a 4-call series right when they sign up. And so that's really how we ensure success and make sure that people are implementing it at a high level early on.
How you mentioned, someone can go in and put metrics on there to prompt people to put certain types of personalities in their referrals. You mentioned that you just mentioned that someone could go on this software and kind of navigate through all of these different KPIs, these leaderboards, and you can't just sign up. You kind of have to work on it, right? You have to work on it to get the recruits. You can't just sign up and it automatically happens. So my question to you is, with all of that, how much time is actually being spent on this? Is it a dedicated employee that's needed, or is it 5 minutes a day? What is the maintenance on this type of thing?
Part of that just comes down to where you prioritize recruiting within your organization. And this is where, a lot of it is depending on how you're structured and how you want to prioritize recruiting. I talked to plenty of roofing companies that if they get 5 sales reps that are pretty solid, like they're set, they're good. They've got or even fiber, like they have a defined territory where they need 10 guys. And it's very much like, cool, I got these 10 guys and that's all I can have. Right. But if you're in an organization where it's like, hey, the more high quality sales reps you have, the better, and that's just consistently helping it scale, then yes, it probably makes sense to pour a lot of energy into that. It might make sense to build a recruiting department. There are also times where it might make sense to just have sales managers doing this for an hour a day. And so I wish I can give you like a very definitive answer, but I would
No,
say
that's a great answer.
it's just it depends on the priority of recruiting within the organization. One of the reasons I'm in the role I'm in is because I do believe recruiting can help solve a lot of problems, right? If you don't like your leadership, cool, recruit new people. If your reps aren't performing, awesome, light a fire under them by recruiting more people, right? If you are a little low on cash, cool, recruit more people. Yeah, that's Always Be Recruiting was the name of our company for that reason, because I do believe it just solves a lot of problems within the organization. Not always with quantity, but definitely with quality of recruitment.
I mean, it is nice to hear that you're passionate about the very product that you've created. So, all right, here's one of my favorite questions that I have for you, because I have participated in, was it just one event, or I've known of several events, but these guys invited me to go out to Tulum and get to see this software firsthand and see what it was capable of. That's why I'm excited to bring it to you here today. But being able to spend time with this crew in a designated area was one of the most fun and transformative, honestly, trips I've ever been on. So here's my question. Your marketing strategy leans heavily on events. You mentioned it earlier, parties and retreats. Have these been more effective than traditional marketing methods?
Depends on your definition of effective, right? I think, is there a world where we just build a marketing funnel and I have people hop on calls and I, just
Sounds
close
like you hate
people
it.
here and there? Like, yes, I'm sure we could do that, right? And I just know that's probably not where my heart would be best spent. And in these events, what I love, in events and retreats is just the level of depth that you can reach with these things, and just the level of experience, that you can have with these kinds of things. And really, if I had to pinpoint what we are best at as a crew, like, me and my partners, is that we love throwing a great event, whether that's a party, whether that's one where there's a lot of depth, where we're doing breath work and we're doing meditation, we're journaling, and we're figuring out more about ourselves, or we're just going to have a blast. Like, I think at Door to Door Con, we probably ran one of the best parties ever thrown in Utah. No offense to Utah, but it was a good one.
But I saw videos. I saw plenty of videos.
In this age of AI, one of the discussions we had in Tulum when you were there is like, what needs to stay human, or what makes human human? And that event actually helped me really reframe how I view AI. I do believe AI is an extension of human consciousness to an extent. But what really does make us human is the human experience, and experience is really at the heart of what we do. And so, it's less that it's necessarily, is it that effective from a sales standpoint versus if we were to build a great marketing funnel. Marketing funnel would probably take a lot less time and a lot less energy, but the human experience is what adds that level of depth and makes things so fun and provides those opportunities to have a big impact, where it's almost like people come into these things expecting to learn more about recruiting and leave learning a lot more about themselves. And I absolutely love when that kind of stuff happens.
I mean, it is kind of great. You built a company, you may as well build it the way that you enjoy it. What does that saying? If you do what you love, you won't work a day in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And why go the method of landing pages and marketing in that way if you can go do the things that you love and generate business that way? Yeah. Well put.
It's a great way for us to meet good people too. I mean, in this industry, that is one of the things you got to do, is you got to figure out who are the good people that you want to hang out with, you want to spend time with, and cool, let's go spend time together, right?
Yeah. Now, a little bit earlier, just when you were answering this question, you mentioned your partners. With 4 partners in your organization, how do you divide responsibilities, and what are each of your specialties?
Yeah, so I've got 3 primary partners on top of myself, Andrew, Jonathan, Anna, and then myself. And Andrew was the one that was my best friend that pulled me out of private equity and said, like, hey, we need someone like you. Like, we've got something here. We need to build this. And Andrew has always been the visionary, right? Forget which book it is. One of the big books talks about, like, your CEO should be a chief visionary officer. And that's really what he is he helps set the direction of the organization and cast the vision for what we can accomplish. He is the big thinker at the long term, and really just meet on a weekly basis to make sure that our rudder is pointed in the right direction for that long term, right? Jonathan is someone that He's really, really great with marketing. He's really, really great with the numbers. He is a little bit more technical than we are. Like, he's the one at the events that not everyone knows who Jonathan is, because he's kind of hanging out in the back, and he's observing the room. But he's brilliant when it comes to observing the room and figuring out like what are the moves we actually need to make. Where he's done a lot of great stuff in the marketing world and has a great track record of success around that.
And if you do talk with him, he's highly sociable too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's not that he's not sociable, but he's calculated. And Anna, we got connected with. It was at an event in Silicon Valley where she was building data dashboards for SAP for a while. And we thought, wow, that's like kind of the exact skill set that we need. And she was looking to make a change in her career, just something that was just a bit more fulfilling, something that she could get passion and energy behind. And this just struck a chord with her, both the product and our team. And we could not be luckier, because she has a team of developers that she is an absolute wizard. And what really, one thing she always talks about is our product is never finished. Right? Early on in the process, we're like, hey, when will it be done? When will it be done? And she constantly told us it's never done. It will never be finished. Like, we will always be changing it, always be improving it, always be looking for what is that next layer. And I love, like, I've never seen such a beautiful example of the growth mindset than what I see in Anna. And
that's cool.
She's this is on a podcast. Maybe keep it a secret. Don't tell her if you hear this, but I think she's overqualified for what she. Every time I'm blown away, I'm like, whoa.
Let's edit that out. No. Anna, if you're listening,
like, I can go listen to it. I'm like, you can do that, and I'm just, for me being a sales guy at heart, being able to take these ideas we have in our head and just get them into a product is like, whoa, I can't believe that's real. And so that's her role. And then, where I've come in is I've been kind of the face of the company. I've been, when it was consulting, I was the one doing a majority of the consulting. We did have a few other people on board, but I love public speaking. I love speaking from stages. I love being the one that shakes hands and kisses babies. I've always been kind of the face of the organization, where, those partners, they've all done most of the behind the scenes work. And I've had the privilege of being kind of at the front of the stage with all of this stuff. So
I want to ask you a random question you just brought up. How do you feel about being the face of an organization? Do you enjoy it, or are there ramifications to it that you don't necessarily enjoy?
It's a great question. I do enjoy it. I do very much enjoy it. I do think it aligns with my strengths, as I was talking about before, just like being the light, and a lot of those more intangible skills have their way of coming to the surface and showing brightly when you are in a role like that. But yeah, absolutely, there are some things that can be frustrating about it, of things that might happen behind the scenes that you're like, all right, I actually had nothing to do with that, and you're responsible for everything, right? Whether there's something that happens financially, or a payment that someone might need, or something. It's like a lot of those things are like, I have to play telephone, because since people see me as in charge of the organization, like, all right, this is all on Luke. But that's the trade-off of being able to be the face of the organization, and the opportunity of the position that I've had. And it kind of forces you to develop those deep lines of communication to make sure that things are running smoothly throughout the entire company.
Oh, great answer. Thanks for sharing that. I know this project has been a huge undertaking, even bringing in Silicon Valley programmers like Anna that you've mentioned. How has that investment improved the customer experience?
I mean, I would say without it, there would be no customer experience. I mean, that's really
that's a huge improvement.
I mean, we had a semblance of it together before we found her, and I tell you, it's not something I would be super, super excited about if she weren't here. But they really look at things just differently than we do. And I think what's really great is how the product has even become like industry agnostic, to where you can apply it to so many different things. And it's, it's almost like amphibian in nature, where it's like, hey, I can apply this here or there or there. And it isn't just like a one size fits all. It's been really good to have that outside perspective, outside of guys that have just been running sales teams for a long time, and so that's one area where I think it's really, really benefited, and really just the long-term vision of where it can go, and what's being built into it, and the order of priority of what's really going to be most valuable for people has been really, really good with that team, of how we've really built this out.
You find the sellability a bit easier because earlier you mentioned spreadsheets. That's one way that it could be done. But this brings that authentication to it, right?
Yep, absolutely. And I'll tell you, even on that note, just like having something where you can have a free trial and prove results first. Like when it comes to my own being congruent with the sales process and being really confident what you're selling, like being in a spot where you can do that, gives me a lot of gratitude. I was just like, cool, I can go to people, and instead of like having to just be the guy that makes a sale and close them on the spot, you can't just like, all right, cool, let's get you set up in a free trial, create some results, and then it's usually no better from there, and so that's a really fun spot to be in. It comes with its own set of lessons. I find selling software is very different than selling consulting. It's been fun to get back in the lab and learn some of those things.
One of my talents I just found out on this podcast was that I can make up new words like authentication. Thank you for letting me explore that with you here today. No, it's a great answer. So what are some common roadblocks when scaling a business, and what key factors are often overlooked in achieving long-term success?
I would say getting someone from 5 to 10 reps or even 10 to 30 reps is really not a very hard endeavor. It's getting beyond that point where I find having a strong leadership development program is such a key. And this is what I find when we have clients that have been working with us a year or longer. Most of the time, what we end up working on is refining their leadership development program, because it's very hard to have 100 reps if you've only got 2 leaders, right? It's nearly impossible.
Yeah.
It's impossible. And I find so often, especially in more sales-driven industries, in ones where we have direct sales and that kind of sales culture, a lot of people get promoted into management roles just because they're good at sales, which is a very different, right? It's a prerequisite. They can't be bad at sales and be a manager, but it is a very different skill set. And so setting up a system, there's a few key components. Is number one, there needs to be both a tangible and intangible nature to earning a role. And what I mean by that is it can't just be, hey, you've sold this amount. All right, cool. Congrats, you're a manager. It's like, no, you sell this amount and that qualifies you to interview for that kind of role. And now the interview gives that little like intangible nature to it where you can say, all right, cool. Here's actually what we'd like to see is we'd like to see in the next 3 months this, and someone that pushes through and does this because this is the habits we want to see in our leadership, right? And so having that intangible nature combined with the tangible nature of earning a specific leadership role, and then training those people ahead of time instead of on the job, right? When people ask me about like retention early on, it's all about how do we create success early. If a rep sells in their first week or 2 on the job, they're probably going to stick around a while, right? Same thing with management is if a manager is a first-time manager and they come out and they suck right off the bat, they're probably not going to make a great manager. Like those guys are probably going to leave. Right. Versus if we can create success early, those people stick around longer. Right. And so training them ahead of time for the role. I like implementing what I call like leadership academies or leadership programs where we're training these people. And in that training program, they're looking to earn their next territory, their next management role, whatever it might be. And we outline what does your perfect manager look like? What are all the skills that they need? And how can we effectively teach this to people, whether it be classroom setting, through observation, through assignments, and figuring out how can we creatively be teaching people these things to actually qualify them for those roles before they get into those roles.
Yeah, it's funny. You at the very beginning of this show, you actually mentioned something like this. You said in order to maintain that retention, in order to retain these reps, you have to have a program of growth that they can see and grow in, right?
Yep.
So you're bringing it right back to that. That's great insight. Was there anything else on that one that I cut you short of?
That feels pretty complete. I mean, having some sort of system for developing leaders internally within your organization is massive, because you can hire sales managers come from the outside, but I find just what that does for the culture. It's possible, but a lot of times it's a real nick on your culture that makes it very hard to come back from.
Oh yeah, for sure. I agree with that. So now to the fun stuff. I only have a couple more questions for you. Looking at everything you've built, what are you most proud of with this program?
I would say I'm most proud of the impact we've had, the impact that I've had with the people just directly around me. And a lot of it kind of in line with, I believe how I answered a question earlier was like, yeah, there's the numbers on the page and I can pull up these case studies and testimonials we have of adding X amount of reps to an organization. But what I'm really, really proud of is when people are overcoming limiting beliefs about themselves and about their business and the impacts that they can have. What I really am proud of is when people go from this very, I'm reluctant to call money hungry, because I think money is very important, but when people go from viewing their people as, just numbers on a spreadsheet, to viewing them as actual people, and like seeing how we can really help them get from where they want to where they want to go. And I start hearing those stories of like, oh yeah, this rep that's been with me for 2 years actually came from Frenzy, came from this strategy that you taught me at this conference, or came from wherever this was. And you can start to see, the impact becomes more tangible a lot of the times as time goes on. And it's very easy for me, to miss that sometimes. And every now and then I get those little reminders where that just lights me on fire inside.
Oh, that's good.
All right, cool. This stuff, it's working. And it's awesome to see the impact beyond just the numbers when you can put a face to it and you're like, all right, that's awesome. Like, that guy's here because of what we implemented,
That's beautiful. On that same trip of that we went on together in Tulum, I did learn there. Someone was talking about applauding and cheering for people that are leaving their organization. They were very thankful that they got the time to work with them, because they built the organization purposely for that. They wanted a platform for these people to come and work on. And rather than get frustrated and be like, I can't believe you're leaving me, and feel like they have some sort of they owe something to remain there. This person was just like, no, I am happy for them. I'm thankful that they spent the time with me, and I cheer for them to move on. 100%. And it's exactly what you're saying. It sounds like you also surround yourself with those types of people that have that type of mindset.
Yeah. A leader is someone that leaves whatever it is better than they found it. Right. And if you want to create community in your organization, right, and you want to, really be a leader for your people, you need to create a sense of safety. If there is that sense of safety, that's what creates community, right? And that safety can come from, hey, it's okay if someone uses this as a stepping stone for 2 or 3 years to go land their dream job, to go start that business they've always dreamed of. That is ultimately helping people get from where they are to where they want to go. And if we can fit things in that framework, then that's leadership, right? And so creating safety for people to say, hey, I want to do this for a few years and leverage this experience to go do XYZ, that should be celebrated. And a lot of people just expect everyone to be with them all the time. And you see all these horror stories in the industry of people that have split up, or partners that have split up, that, sometimes it's merited, but a lot of times it's like, hey, it was just time for the next chapter in their lives, right? And if you're strong, you have great recruiting and you have great leadership development, it's okay if people leave, right? Because you can have that next man up mentality, which is another reason why I love operating in this space, is because it does free people up to use this job as a vehicle. It's a vehicle to help them get where they want to go. It's not necessarily the end game for everybody.
How cool. I love that. So here's the big question. We get to the end of the podcast for this one. What is the strongest advice that you have for people that are looking to recruit and do it well?
I would say, I've mentioned it a bunch of times at this point already, but help people get from where they are to where they want to go, right? That's ultimately what our product is, and when I went from being a sales rep into becoming a leader, becoming a manager, I learned that really is your product. Once you are in a leadership role, your product is the opportunity that can change lives, right? And if you're here because you're that fired up about green energy, awesome. I love that. That's great. But I'm guessing most of you guys are here because you're passionate about the opportunity in and of itself. And so, make that opportunity as great as possible. Spread the word about it. Don't be afraid to go headhunt the right people for it. And that is your product. That is what you should be proud of. And that is what should wake you up in the morning if you're doing it the right way, right? And I think that is the case for a lot of people. And just realizing that and starting from that standpoint is such a healthy place to be leading people, right? And really what's going to create an impact with everything that we do.
Luke, what is the best way for everybody to get a hold of you if they're inspired by this podcast or want some serious recruiting?
Yeah. So, a couple ways. Number one, you can always hit me up on Instagram. It's at Luke Miseyko. Last name might be a little hard. You can probably see it on the title of the podcast, but LukeMiseyko. We will put a link in this podcast, whether you're watching on YouTube or you're listening to it, for a free trial, which at the end of that link, it'll have you schedule a call with our team or potentially with me where we'll go through and we can help you get set up. And like I said, we guarantee a minimum of 3 hires for free just by clicking that link. And so go on there, check it out. You'll get our full product suite here for 30 days, and then we can figure out where we want to take it from there. But our goal is to have as big of an impact as possible. So I would encourage you guys, go ahead, just click that. Anyone that is listening to this episode, you've got access to that. So those are the 2 best ways to get a hold of us.
Luke, thank you for hopping on and sharing all this wisdom and your passion with us. We very much appreciate it, and we'll see you out there.
Thanks for having me, brother.